Everyone, I am Kisha Zullo, founder of the Women in Business Summit, and I'm so excited. You know, the 15th annual Women in Business Summit is coming up at the end of this month, July 30th and 31st, and we have some amazing speakers. And included in that list of amazing lineup is a wonderful woman I'm going to be talking to today. Her name is Dr. Lucy Gilson. And Dr. Gilson is the Associate Dean of Faculty and Outreach for the University of Connecticut School of Business. Go UConn. She is also a visiting research fellow at one of the top universities in Portugal. And she is the academic director of the Gino Auriemma UConn Leadership Conference. Dr. Gilson, welcome.
Excited to be here. Good morning.
Good morning. We were just talking about, is it Thursday, Wednesday, Friday?
And does it really matter?
And does it really matter? Exactly. But we're keeping it together. So I am fascinated by your background because it's dealing with one of the topics and one of the areas that we focus on for WIB Summit, and that is on leadership, and in particular, women in leadership. So you've done a lot of research on examining teams in different settings, their performance in diverse jobs. What are the things that you've noticed in your research when it comes to women and women in leadership?
So that's a huge long question. In fact, that as a professor, that could be a whole semester course,
right?
On women in leadership. So let's just talk about a couple of things, because yes, as you said, I'm hugely passionate about this. So one of the things that got me, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit, interested in this topic is I'm super interested in the notion of fairness. And we know that how you treat people is actually more important than the outcome. So you can have an outcome that you don't really like. Something can be as simple as a speeding ticket. It could be you get laid off. But if you're treated fairly,
right,
we call procedural justice, you can actually be okay with that outcome. You have voice, you're treated with respect, you're listened to, you get your say, and the processes are followed through. So that actually got me sort of started on this research journey. And my dissertation actually examined the relationship between diverse groups and fairness, and then different outcomes, in particular creativity. And so what I ended up finding is, we always think that diverse groups are going to be better at being creative. And that's really not the case, because they don't always know how to talk to each other. But they are definitely more creative when there is procedural justice. So how you feel your voice is going to be heard. If you feel like you come up with this crazy idea and it's going to be heard and people aren't going to make fun of you, then then the diverse group pays off to help you be creative. So how that circles back to women is that one of the things that we know is that women are really good at building collaborative teams. So women are much more inclusive in their leadership style, which is why, coming back to the situation that we're in now, we're starting to see these amazing examples of these women leaders through COVID. New Zealand comes up all the time, because women are less likely to seek the spotlight and have the win, and more likely to listen to everybody's perspective, and so bring all the experts to the table. The other thing about women's leadership that I think is super interesting is that often when you have women in leadership roles, everybody else works harder, because again, they have this collaborative view. So now if we're all working hard and one person isn't, that becomes your weak link. So everybody comes together. So when on corporate boards, for instance, we see very few women, but on the boards that have more women, the whole board works harder and there's more accountability.
Wow. So I love that, because that does not connect with what I'm seeing with women in leadership and the numbers. You would think that they would be higher, that they would want, because of the research is there and the numbers are there. What do you think is holding that process back?
Well, and then a little bit that's a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're collaborative, you're not claiming that this was my idea.
Ah, okay.
So now when we go and tap somebody, we might not necessarily tap you. So one of the things that, I spend a lot of time with our students and undergrad and MBA women is how to get credit for your work without losing that benefit of the collaborative piece. right? So, and again, women are, so my favorite book, someone just asked me this the other day, is, what books do you recommend? This is an oldie but a goodie. It's written by Deborah Tannen, and it's called You Just Don't Understand, which is differences between how men and women talk. And then the follow-up book was Talking 9 to 5. And again, her analysis shows that when women are talking to build collaboration, right, they're not talking to claim the idea is theirs, because they know that if everybody buys into the idea, we all own it and it's going to happen and we're all going to be vested in it. But again, if no one has claimed it, and this is where women really struggle, is we don't say that was Kisha's idea, we should promote her. And probably somewhere along the line, intentionally or not, and that's a whole nother conversation, a man has said I, and now we've gone, wow, that was John's idea, and we have promoted him.
Interesting.
So there's some really interesting work coming out now, both with regard to women and people of color, which is called amplification, which is how can all of us make sure that we amplify women and Black voices. And so how do we make sure we say, that idea started with Kisha. Oh, let me cite Lucy. And so that we make sure that we don't fall back onto our old stereotypes of, oh, there's all this work, historically by white men, and keep promoting that, but actually amplify the voices that we haven't heard as much.
Wow, I love that. And you said something at the beginning of the conversation about having it as a procedure. So is it something that companies can write into their succession or planning, or any of their plans to move people into different positions? Is that something that the organization can do before the teams are built?
So it's interesting. I haven't seen that well, yes and no. So I haven't seen that per se, but I have recently seen a movement, let me call it that, where scholars in certain areas are actually putting together, so in my field, citation documents of works on topics by people, and sort of doing it that way. So I don't know about it from an I don't have any data to speak from an organizational policy, but I think one of the things that you highlighted on that I do want to come back to is succession planning. And I think succession planning is so critical, and that we in leadership roles need to look at who do we see as that next generation and how do we support them. So there always is a little bit of that, you have to be it to see it. So I think women have to go out and see some young women and start working with them. So mentoring relationships develop both ways. We tend to think about junior people seeking out mentors, but we also know that that's very difficult if you're in a minority position. So my first PhD student and I did her dissertation. So it wasn't we did, she did her dissertation, and I advised her. So let's credit where it's due. And she's now a dean, 9th Hispanic Business School woman dean in the country, 9th Hispanic dean woman, amazing, Rowena. So shout out to her. But what she looked at is often students of individuals of color, Hispanic, Black, didn't look for Hispanic or Black mentors because they wanted to be associated with the majority group. And so therefore that has a double negative effect. It meant that Black and Hispanic senior people didn't get to mentor people who were like them. And we know that mentoring relationships that have more of a commonality do better, right? So actually in the long run hurt the protege and also hurt the mentors. And so what that says to me, and what one of the things that we talk about, is mentors also have to go out and find people who they feel have potential. And we have to be more cognizant of, yes, that woman might not have spoken up because she's not seeking the limelight.
Right.
That, a Black individual we may not have thought about them because, again, they're not in the minority group, so may not have been pushed forward by the cohort. So how do we do that in a very thoughtful manner?
Interesting. I want to come back to something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's been about mindset and how that can impact your even being able to speak up and say, that was my idea, and having that and quelling that imposter syndrome. Like, how can I've only seen examples of this is what leadership looks like, but I'm not that. What advice have you seen, or do you even think about women in leadership and how that correlates with mindset and having a strong mindset?
Think about that all the time, and somewhere behind me is actually a book on women and the imposter syndrome. So
that's great. I'm glad we're diving into it a little bit.
I actually don't know where that is at the moment. So absolutely all the time. And so I'm going to give you an example from the book, which I loved. And it basically says, there's a team and it's halftime, and the coach goes into the locker room and says, and it's a women's team. So again, I work with Coach Ariyama, the most amazing women's basketball coach. And so you go into the locker room and you say, we're down by 2 points. We've really got to do better. This is effort. This is, us coming together. And everybody in the room, all the women go, oh, you know what? I really should have, I shouldn't have gone out last night. That's on me. I really needed to do this. Oh, okay. When we go back, I'm gonna really step it up. Transfer, same situation. You're down by a couple points. Man goes into male locker room, says, you're not all putting it out. And every man in the room looks around and goes, who is that SOB who's not doing it? No one internalizes it. So when things aren't going well and we're worried about this, women are always saying, oh, it's me. I didn't work hard enough. I don't have the credentials to apply for this job. So you handicap yourself,
yes.
Right? So your mindset is, and again, research supports this, oh, I don't have all the credentials for the job, so I won't apply. Men go, I have 2, I'll apply. So your mindset is, I can't do it. And so a lot of that is, how do we reframe that, saying, look, you have this, you can do it. Again, a lot of that is mentoring. A lot of that is, those of us who've, been around for a long time talking about this, because it also is very similar to unconscious bias.
Oh,
right?
goodness.
Unconscious bias means, you know what it means, but it means that people are saying things and they don't realize.
Right.
So we know for women that people often don't like it when women negotiate, because, that's that assertive, aggressive thing. But we also know that if they don't, we don't respect them as much. So again, you get into this bind. So one of the things that, I coach women to do all the time is, if you're negotiating with a man, you can actually look them in the eye and say, listen, I'm going to negotiate because that is what is expected of the position. That is the right thing to do. And I know unconsciously you're not going to like me as much for doing this. But it's, if I don't do it, how do you expect to have a senior leader who doesn't negotiate?
Right.
By virtue of the fact that you've called out the unconscious bias, because the person wasn't sitting there going, oh, I'm not going to like you because you asked for more money. That's unconscious. So by the fact that you've brought it to the forefront, now it kind of it dissipates a little bit.
Right.
So we have to be better at facing up and having those difficult conversations and saying to people, listen, I know that this is going to be a difficult conversation, but we have to have it for this reason.
Wow, incredible. I am so excited by this conversation. We could go on for a very long time, because it's something that I've seen throughout my own career with women in leadership, in my own self, how to navigate and looking back at, okay, why did I make that decision, and where's the source? What's that coming from? Why did I hesitate to make this move or that? And then watching the male counterparts do just boldly, confidently do things, and you're like, that doesn't even make any sense. And, or if I said an idea and the idea was said by someone else who happens to be male, and that's touted as, okay, great. It's so important, especially if you're looking to move up as a leader. Our audience are filled with entrepreneurs and folks in the corporate world and different leadership roles. So always working on your leadership is super important. I want to turn the conversation a little bit to talk about you and all the numerous teaching awards that you've won. Tell me what motivates you, what's your passion, and how did you land on doing this type of work?
Yeah. So I didn't start out doing this. I started out doing marketing for a division of M&M Mars. So my undergrad was at Georgetown School of Foreign Service. And so I wanted to do something international. And I loved marketing. Actually, my honors thesis as an undergrad was on whether hotels would move from keys to key cards. So, you know, A, that says I'm really old, and B, that sort of kind of got me into this whole entrepreneurship, creativity, marketing. So I worked in marketing through a whole slew of unusual events, which is again how life unfolds.
Yes.
I ended up in Atlanta. So I was in London doing Mars, working for Mars, and went back to grad school and just loved it. I loved the fact that you could research topics, the things that we've been talking about. So I researched creativity, I researched teams. I do a lot of work in virtual teams now. I have this sort of passion for this fairness issue, mentoring. You know, I just found this career where if there's something you were passionate about, you could research it and find out more, right? So that was just like this luxury. And then, you know, I sort of got into the teaching piece, and teaching is just fun because you know, your role is to get people to think about things differently, to think about things they've never thought about. They're young, they're entrepreneurial, they don't know what they want to do with their lives. You know, you get students, I've had so many young women who they plop themselves down in your office and they're like, oh, I just don't know what I want to do. My father wants me to be an accountant, blah, 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 you know, and you chat to them and you start to see their passion, and you can really rewarding. A student messaged me, I don't know, since we don't know what day it is, one day in the last week, saying, you know, I think of you all the time because you, well, I'm just not just, and I said, you've just got to stop saying just.
Yes.
And she said, you know, I go into meetings now and I feel myself want to say it and I don't say it, and I can hear how I come across. And those are the stories that give you goosebumps. And that just is, you know, it's just so rewarding, and you just feel like you're working with that next generation, and it's so much fun.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And how have you managed through this COVID situation personally and professionally? What are some of the shifts that you had to make as a leader and someone who consults and lead folks?
So my dean role, it was sort of the confluence of all things came together with COVID. So I oversee faculty. And so all of a sudden it was 123 full-time faculty and 50 adjuncts all had to go online, right? So that was, and I oversee IT, who knew, and how do we get everybody technologically working? And then the university did an incredibly cool thing. We put together a COVID class, interdisciplinary. And I headed up the business section, but the first part of the class was on the virus. So there was virologists and vaccine faculty sort of talking about that piece. The second piece of the class was on public health. And then the third piece was on how the virus is affecting businesses. So probably the first 7 weeks we were home. I did not leave this room. And luckily I have an amazing husband. My son came home from college because like everybody else, he went online, and he was pretty amazing. And everybody we sort of rallied round. And then about 7 weeks I crashed and, you know, now sort of finding the rhythm. But one of the things that's been really interesting for me is that I also study virtual teams, and now we're all part of a virtual team. So it's almost like I had like this experiment where I could try all these things that we find that work in the research. With all my teams. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you win some, you lose some, right? I mean, there's some days where like everybody else, you're exhausted and you're on the verge of tears and this thing is going to break you down. And other days you feel like, I got this. Yeah. And I think, again, you know, as a woman and as a leader, it's okay to show that. I mean, you have to be strong for your team, obviously. But, you know, it's okay for people to know that, you know, today I'm just beaten down. And I got nothing.
Yeah.
And
I think that's important. Yeah, absolutely think that's important for you to be vulnerable and just be real with your team. I think it builds even more respect for the leader. I think of my two favorite leaders that I've had, and they were always authentic. They were who they were with everybody. they didn't play favorites, and you kind of knew where you stood, and you saw their vulnerable, compassionate side, just as you saw their business, let's get it done side. And one happens to be a man and one happens to be a woman. So I agree with
Right.
you there. This
Yeah,
is
and I have to say I have a great team.
yeah.
So they have all, rallied and worked incredibly hard. I mean, we keep hearing about all these people who have all this extra time. We haven't had it, but
Right.
and everybody has supported everybody else. So one team was extremely pressured at one stage, and others, how can we help you? And we've had, do what it takes to make things work. So, it brings out, crisis bring out the good in people as well. And I've seen a lot of that.
Yes.
A lot of
I could really talk to you, because now you've piqued my interest about virtual teams and how to manage that. We could be on this thing forever, but we have to close the conversation. So I'd love for our audience, we are going to get to know Dr. Gilson, because she's one of our featured speakers on the leadership panel for the 15th Annual Women in Business Summit, which is coming up on July 30th. So if you haven't already secured your seat, please do so. It's a virtual experience and we're really excited. So the conversation will continue there. She's part of one of our, like I said, our leadership panel. But where can the audience connect with you outside of this conversation and beyond?
So connect me on LinkedIn. So I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I think that's a, I'm trying to do more on LinkedIn with posting things for women and sharing interesting articles and things like that. If you have specific things, you can email me at UConn. But probably LinkedIn is probably the best way. Join my network, and then, we can also connect. I try and be responsive at responding to messages through LinkedIn. Actually, I'm getting better. So yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, and I think for me, a tip for LinkedIn for you guys watching, if you've met her here virtually, just say, hi, Dr. Gilson, I saw you on Women in Business, just so you know. I always tell someone, if I saw them at a networking event or anything, tell them how I know them. So it's not, completely blind, no connection whatsoever. So just a little tip there. Well, Dr. Gilson, thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation. I look forward to seeing you at the 15th Annual Women in Business Summit.
Thanks, Kisha. Looking forward to being there.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Your week.